The History of Tom Jones, a Foundling, by Henry Fielding. Book 1, Chapter 3. An odd accident which befell Mr. Allworthy at his return home. The decent behaviour of Mrs. Deborah Wilkins, with some proper animadversions on bastards. I have told my reader in the preceding chapter that Mr. Allworthy inherited a large fortune, that he had a good heart, and no family. Hence, doubtless, it will be concluded by many that he lived like an honest man, owed no one a shilling, took nothing but what was his own, kept a good house, entertained his neighbours with a hearty welcome at his table, and was charitable to the poor, i.e., to those who had rather beg than work, by giving them the offals from it. That he died immensely rich, and built a hospital. And true it is that he did many of these things, but had he done nothing more, I should have left him to have recorded his own merit on some fair free stone over the door of that hospital. Matters of a much more extraordinary kind are to be the subject of this history, or I should grossly misspend my time in writing so voluminous a work, and you, my sagacious friend, might, with equal profit and pleasure, travel through some pages with which certain droll authors have been facetiously pleased to call the History of England. Mr. Allworthy had been absent a full quarter of a year in London, on some very particular business, though I know not what it was, but judge of its importance by its having detained him so long from home, whence he had not been absent a month at a time during the space of many years. He came to his house very late in the evening, and after a short supper with his sister, retired much fatigued to his chamber. Here, having spent some minutes on his knees, a custom which he never broke through on any account, he was preparing to step into bed, when, upon opening the cloths, to his great surprise, he beheld an infant wrapped up in some coarse linen, in a sweet and profound sleep between his sheets. He stood some time lost in astonishment at this sight, but, as good nature had always the ascendant in his mind, he soon began to be touched with sentiments of compassion for the little wretch before him. He then rang his bell, and ordered an elderly woman servant to rise immediately and come to him, and in the meantime was so eager in contemplating the beauty of innocence, appearing in those lively colours with which infancy and sleep always display it, that his thoughts were too much engaged to reflect that he was in his shirt when the matron came in. She had indeed given her master sufficient time to dress himself, for out of respect to him, and regard to decency, she had spent many minutes in adjusting her hair at the looking-glass, notwithstanding all the hurry in which she had been summoned by the new servant, and though her master, for aught she knew, lay expiring in an apoplexy, or in some other fit. It will not be wondered at that a creature who had so strict a regard to decency in her own person should be shocked at the least deviation from it in another. She therefore no sooner opened the door and saw her master standing by the bedside in his shirt, with a candle in his hand, than she started back in a most terrible fright, and might perhaps have swooned away, had he not now recollected his being undressed, and put an end to her terrors by desiring her to stay without the door till he had thrown some clothes over his back, and was become incapable of shocking the pure eyes of Mrs. Deborah Wilkins, who, though in the 52nd year of her age, vowed she had never beheld a man without his coat. Sneerers and profane wits may perhaps laugh at her first fright, yet my grave reader, when he considers the time of night, the summons from her bed, and the situation in which she found her master, will highly justify and applaud her conduct, unless the prudence, which must be supposed to attend maidens at that period of life at which Mrs. Deborah had arrived, should a little lessen his admiration. When Mrs. Deborah returned into the room, and was acquainted by her master with the finding the little infant, her consternation was rather greater than his had been, nor could she refrain from crying out, with great honour of accent as well as look, "My good sir, what's to be done?" Mr. Allworthy answered she must take care of the child that evening, and in the morning he would give orders to provide it a nurse. "Yes, sir," says she, "and I hope your worship will send out your warrant to take up the hussy its mother, for she must be one of the neighbourhood, and I should be glad to see her committed to Bridewell, and whipped at the cart's tail. Indeed, such wicked sluts cannot be too severely punished. I'll warrant 'tis not her first, by her imprudence in laying it to your worship." "In laying it to me, Deborah?" answered Allworthy. "I can't think she hath any such design. I suppose she hath only taken this method to provide for her child, and truly I am glad she hath not done worse." "I don't know what is worse," cries Deborah, "than for such wicked strumpets to lay their sins at honest men's doors. And though your worship knows your own innocence, yet the world is censorious. And it hath been many an honest man's hap to pass for the father of children he never begot. And if your worship should provide for the child, it may make the people the apter to believe. Besides, why should your worship provide for what the parish is obliged to maintain? For my own part, if it was an honest man's child indeed, but for my own part, it goes against me to touch these misbegotten wretches, whom I don't look upon as my fellow creatures. Faugh! How it stinks! It doth not smell like a Christian. If I might be so bold to give my advice, I would have put it in a basket, sent it out, and laid at the churchwarden's door. It is a good night, only a little rainy and windy, and if it was well wrapped up, and put in a warm basket, it is 2 to 1, but it lives till it is found in the morning. But if it should not, we have discharged our duty in taking proper care of it, and it is, perhaps, better for such creatures to die in a state of innocence than to grow up and imitate their mothers, for nothing better can be expected of them." There were many strokes in that speech which perhaps would have offended Mr. Allworthy, had he strictly attended to it. But he had now got one of his fingers into the infant's hand, which, by its gentle pressure, seeming to implore his assistance, had certainly outplayed the eloquence of Mrs. Deborah, had it been 10 times greater than it was. He now gave Mrs. Deborah positive orders to take the child to her own bed, and to call up a maid-servant to provide it pap, and other things against it waked. He likewise ordered that proper clothes should be procured for it early in the morning, and that it should be brought to himself as soon as he was stirring. Such was the discernment of Mrs. Wilkins, and such the respect she bore her master, under whom she enjoyed a most excellent place, that her scruples gave way to his peremptory commands, and she took the child under her arms, without any apparent disgust at the illegality of its birth, and declaring it was a sweet little infant, walked off with it to her own chamber. Allworthy here betook himself to those pleasing slumbers which a heart that hungers after goodness is apt to enjoy, when, thoroughly satisfied, as these are possibly sweeter than what are occasioned by any other hearty meal, I should take more pains to display them to the reader, if I knew any heir to recommending him to for the procuring such an appetite.